But you see, what I didn't realize at the time and what Kevin had to learn the hard way is we were breaking an unwritten and unspoken rule of show business. And if I say it, you'll know that I'm telling you the truth. The rule is that no matter what you do in your artistic expression, you are never, ever allowed to upset the alphabet people. You know who I mean. Those people that took 20% of the alphabet for themselves.
So, they attempted to cancel Dave Chappelle. Netflix employees walked out, Twitter was on fire, and the media was already writing his comedic obituary. But here's the thing. Dave Chappelle is not your typical comedian. He's a cultural icon, a truth teller, and someone who turned away $50 million to defend his reputation. When he took aim at woke culture, everyone knew something major was going to happen, and he produced a performance that completely changed the discourse. The man refuses to back down and makes no apologies for voicing his mind, and it is precisely why he remains at the pinnacle of humor.
I was the biggest Jim Carrey fan in the world. Now, I'm not going to go all into it, but Jim Carrey is talented in a way that you can't practice or rehearse. What a God-given talent. I was fascinated with him. And Norm knew that. And he called me up and he goes, Dave, he says, I'm doing a movie with Jim Carrey. Do you want to meet him? And I said, fuck, yes, I do. And it was the first time I could remember since my father died being excited. And the movie was called Man on the Moon. I didn't know any of this. And in this movie, Jim Carrey was playing another comedian I admired, the late, great Andy Kaufman. Yes, and Jim Carrey was so immersed in that role that from the moment he woke up to the time he went to bed at night, he would live his life as Andy Kaufman. I didn't know that. When they said cut, this nigga was still Andy Kaufman. So much so that everybody on the crew called him Andy. I didn't know any of that. I just went there to meet him, and when he walked into the room where we were supposed to meet, I screamed, Jim Carrey! And everyone said, no! Call him Andy. And I didn't understand. And then he came over and he was acting weird. I didn't know he was acting like Andy Kaufman. Just like, hey, how you doing? And I was like, hello. Andy? Now, in hindsight, how fucking lucky am I that I got to see one of the greatest artists of my time immersed in one of his most challenging processes ever. Very lucky to have seen that. But as it was happening, I was very disappointed. Because I wanted to meet Jim Carrey, and I had to pretend this nigga was Andy Kaufman all afternoon. And he was clearly Jim Carrey. I could look at him and I could see he was Jim Carrey. Anyway, I say all that to say, that's how trans people make me feel.
Dave Chappelle's The Closer began simply enough, with a story about meeting Jim Carrey on the set of Man on the Moon, only to discover Carrey was so immersed in character as Andy Kaufman that Chappelle never met his hero, only Kaufman's ghost. But that amusing incident was only the beginning of what would become one of the most divisive comedy specials of all time. Then came the line that ignited the internet. That is how trans people make me feel. 3 simple words, but they exploded like a cultural grenade. Netflix employees staged walkouts, protesters demanded the special's cancellation, and opinion articles flooded the internet, accusing Chappelle of hate speech. But instead of apologizing, he doubled down, arguing that discomfort isn't the same as harm, and that being offended doesn't automatically make you right. His defiance became a rallying cry for comedians tired of treading on eggshells, proving once again that, love him or hate him, Chappelle wasn't about to start whispering his jokes.
You'll be surprised. I have friends, all kinds of letters. Everybody loves me, and I love everybody. I got friends who are L's, I got friends who are B's, and I got friends who are G's.
Making people think while they laugh or rage is Chappelle's true talent, not just cracking jokes. His detractors frequently fail to see the wider picture. He is challenging a culture that requires complete acceptance while excluding all discussion, not attacking any specific group. He says, I do not understand all of this, but that does not mean I have to be angry about it. That's the admission of a man attempting to make sense of a complicated world without losing his sense of humor, not the rallying cry of a villain. But nuance is a tough sell in an outrage economy. and Chappelle's refusal to read from the approved script has made him a lightning rod for controversy, even as his real message remains far more thoughtful than his critics give him credit for.
When I watch sports, I be thinking about, think about, okay, say LeBron James changed his gender. You know what I mean? Okay, can he stay in the NBA, or because he's a woman, does he have to go to the WNBA where he will score 840 points a game?
The mainstream media made an effort to portray Chappelle as a bigot, but they failed to grasp his major point, which is that humor and respect don't have to conflict. He has adhered to this attitude from Chappelle's show to his most recent stand-up specials. Laughing together may actually be the first step toward true understanding. His complete reluctance to apologize for the jokes, however, was what truly drove woke society into a tailspin. He stated, "I am not saying these things to be mean," without apologizing or changing his mind when asked about his humor. "I'm saying these because they're humorous, and if you don't see the humor in them, perhaps the joke itself isn't the issue." That unshakable stance didn't just ruffle feathers. It became a blueprint for anyone tired of tiptoeing around outrage culture, proving that sometimes the funniest thing you can do is just not say sorry.
You know, you hear all those letters together all the time, LBGT, LBGT, and you think it's just one big movement. It's not. All those letters are their own movement. They just travel in the same car together.
Because of his own experiences as a black man in America, Chappelle has a razor-sharp perspective on identity politics. By pointing out that everyone looks to be racing to the bottom rather than acknowledging that perhaps, just possibly, we are all struggling together, he mocks the ridiculousness of oppressive systems. This goes right to the heart of current discussions about social justice. He handles controversy strategically rather than carelessly. He begins with something that seems straightforward or ridiculous, then he reveals deeper truths by removing layers. His joke about identifying as Chinese while wearing a black body is a masterpiece in analyzing the inconsistencies of identity politics, and it goes beyond simple shock humor. His prediction was confirmed by the response to his specials, which turned viewers of his stand-up into experts on what Chappelle really meant, even though they had never seen a minute of it. The algorithm drove the getaway car, while social media exploded in indignation. Headlines shouted "controversy," and clips were pulled out of context.
Does it actually mean to be equal? You know what I mean? Like, women are actually equal to men, then there would be no WNBA, would there? You would just be good enough to play in the NBA with us. Or, here's another idea that's going to be very controversial. You could, like I was saying, my guess is the G's are driving that car. That makes sense to me, because there's white men in the G's. And these people are trying to get around discrimination and oppression. And you know how white dudes are. We know these roads. In fact, we built these roads.
Why is Chappelle a real threat to awaken society? He's simply irrevocable. His supporters are too devoted, his impact is too great, and, worst of all for his detractors, his arguments are simply too plausible. It gets increasingly difficult to remain angry the longer you listen to him. However, Chappelle is now more than simply a comic. He is a voice for people who feel silenced by the culture of today. In addition to keeping him on stage, his unafraid approach to forbidden subjects has inspired other comedians to cease self-censoring and resist the outrage machine. What about that knock-on effect? It's already changing the way we discuss controversy, demonstrating that sometimes the loudest mic drop isn't actually dropping the mic.
There's one thing that the L's and the G's agree on, is that the B's are fucking gross. They seem greedy to the L's and the G's, you know what I mean? They're just sitting in the back seat like, yeah, man, I'll fuck anybody in this car. What's going on, man? And sitting next to the B's, all the way in the back seat by themselves, looking out the window.
gets the tease. Everybody in the car respects the tease, but everyone also resents the tease. It's not the tease fault, but everyone in the car just feels like the tease are making the trip take longer.
Love him or hate him, Dave Chappelle has cemented himself as one of the most important voices in modern comedy. Not because he chases controversy, but because he refuses to run from it. His ability to blend humor with sharp social commentary has made him both a target and a trailblazer, challenging the idea that offense is the same as harm. While critics rage and headlines scream, Chappelle remains unshaken, proving that true comedy isn't about playing it safe. It's about making people think, laugh, and sometimes even squirm. And in an era where walking on eggshells has become the norm, his refusal to tiptoe might just be the most radical act of all.